starting in Job 25, and I think we'll probably get through 27. We're just going to kind of monitor the time, make sure I'm not going crazy long period of time. But as you'll see, especially chapter 25, it's pretty short. So verse 1 of chapter 25 says, Then answered Bildad the Shuhite and said, Dominion and fear are with him. He maketh peace in his high places. So the idea is that no person can comprehend God and God's doings, and of course, he's basically right in some of the things that he said, and that's what we keep saying stuff like this, that there are some pieces of wisdom in the things that these men are saying, these friends of Job are saying, but they've got the context so wrong that they really are really causing harm to Job, and they're saying evil things of Job, even though they have no idea what Job has actually done, and really Job has done nothing, and so they have no clue, but they're giving these accusations. But Job is responding to them, and then now this response from Bildad is saying, look, nobody can comprehend God's doings. It says, verse 3, Is there any number of his armies, and upon whom doth not his light arise? And so basically, is there any limitations to God's army? Of course, the answer to that's very simply no. There's no limitation. God has a multitude of angels. If you look at Daniel chapter 9, there are thousands upon thousands that are mentioned, and if you do the math and follow it out, it's just 4 million angels. But God can make anything. Angels are created beings, and so therefore He can make as many as He wants. So is there any limitation? Of course, there's no limitation to God's army. And of course, can God, it says, and upon whom doth not his light arise? You can look at this in a couple of ways, but if you think about the idea of light is the exposing of things, whether you make this literally the sun, or you think about it as just God having understanding of things. But either way, God is going to be able to see anything, and so that's pretty much the idea there in verse 3. So He's got unlimited resources in armies, so you can't stand up against them, and He knows everything. Verse 4, How then can man be justified with God? Or how can he be clean that is born of a woman? And so He's saying, look, Job, you cannot justify yourself. You are born, you're a human being. You're not anything special. You can't take care of yourself. Are you justifying yourself? Job, you cannot justify yourself. Comparing that to God, who is the ultimate of right and good and justice. He can't, He's saying, Job, you can't justify yourself before God. You can't hold yourself to a position that really makes yourself equal to God, or you can't make yourself right with God. And so how can he be clean that is born of a woman? Everybody, and this is kind of one of those things, I think, where people have this kind of a mindset, everybody's a sinner. Everybody is a sinner, and that I preach on this as often as I can without being too redundant. And that is that so many times people want to say, we're all sinners. We are not all sinners. That is not right. That is not the right mindset. If you go over to 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 9 through 11, it shows a list of sins and even types of sinners there, and it says what? And such were some of you. That's what you used to be. You're not that anymore. You used to be these people. You used to be a sinner, but you're not that anymore. And just quickly, because I know I've said this before, but anybody who might have missed it and hasn't heard this, I liken that to somebody that runs. If you are a runner, that means that you probably get up, most days of the week, and you start running. At least you do it multiple times in a week, right? You do it frequent enough that you can actually go out and run. Some people cannot do that. They cannot get up and just get off the couch and start running. Why is that? Well, it's very simple. It's because they're not accustomed to running. So, that being the case, if you were to take someone who runs multiple times in a week, and then you were to take someone else who has not run in years, and you get them up and they run, one is a runner and one is not. And that person that just got up off the couch, just because they run one time, does that make them a runner? No, because a runner is somebody who continually runs. Somebody who is in the process of running. They do it on a regular basis. That's what a sinner is. A sinner is somebody who commits sin on a regular basis. So that's important for us to realize. But here it is, this idea. How can he be clean that is born of a woman? Well, we know the answer to that in the New Testament. We are justified by Christ. That's very, very plain to see. And of course, we have been saved by the blood of Christ. We know that from Romans chapter 6. So because of that, we know that we can live righteously. But here it is, they're saying, look, you obviously, you're a human being, and because of that, you have great limitations here. Verse 5, Behold, even to the moon, and it shineth not, yea, the stars are not pure in his sight. So, when the sun is right there and the moon is right there, can you see the moon? Well, no. The sun is too bright. You cannot look and see the stars because of the sun. The sun is so much brighter than the stars, and so the idea the stars are not pure in His sight. Why? Because they're not nearly as bright as the sun. And think about that. The stars are not pure. So no man can be pure is the statement being given. The stars are not pure in His sight, and that's given. Saying, look, you're only you're got a little brightness, but God's brightness is so much greater. Verse 6: How much less man, that is a worm, and the Son of Man, which is a worm. So. He does not have a high estimation of humanity. Mankind is not great. This is kind of an interesting statement, and I'm not sure that we ought to really say this. It's just kind of a thought I've had, and I'm going to look into this more. But he's saying, how much less man that is a worm. You think about man. Man, yes, is insignificant when it comes to God, but has been created in the image of God. We are significantly hindered in our understanding and respect to God. But does that bring us all the way down? I mean, did Christ, when He come back, did He come and he was a lowly worm? That's the kind of idea I'm getting here. Is that He's made this abased, far abased than what it should be. And yes, though the idea still reigns that yes, God is infinitely great, and man, on the other hand, is not. So that in and of itself is true. Chapter 26. But Job answered and said. So I kind of wonder about this because here we've had such long discourses, and then here we have just a short response, and then Job jumped in, and it almost seems like as if just stop right there, and then he jumps in. Maybe Bildad has taken a short enough breath that Job has been able to jump in. I don't know. It just kind of seems like maybe he jumps in real quick to answer this. But it says, But Job answered and said, How hast thou helped him that is without power? How savest thou the arm that hath no strength? So this is, there are a few instances of sarcasm in the Bible, and this is one of those. He's saying, how in the world have you helped me? How have you helped me, man that is, abased? I want to say this because I mentioned that this is sarcasm. Now, I saw that somebody here recently had written something about, and I don't know if I have no clue. I cannot remember who it was. I cannot remember if it was a part of the church or not. I'm not sure, so I wouldn't call anybody out on that. But they talked about how sarcasm it never helps somebody in spreading the word. I would tend to disagree to some extent. You don't want to use sarcasm in a way to demean somebody, but sarcasm here is used very effectively, and so he says, "How hast thou helped him that is without power? How savest thou the arm that hath no strength?" And so, here he's saying, "Look, you guys haven't helped me at all." He's not being terribly demeaning here. He's not, I think when people think about sarcasm, I think sometimes maybe they think it's a way of being able to make fun of somebody. I don't think when we're using it in this sense that it's like Job is making fun of anybody. And the same thing is true. I think sarcasm can be used in a very pointed sense. I think back to James chapter 2, and when you look at verses 17 and following, where you're talking about being justified by works and various things, and it says there at the end of chapter 2, it uses sarcasm. James uses sarcasm there. He says, "You believe there is one God, you do well. Even the demons believe and tremble." That to my best understanding is sarcasm, but it's being pointed out. It's saying, look, obviously the end result of that thought is, the demons, they may believe, but they're not going to go to heaven. People think oftentimes, all I have to do is believe. But according to that passage, that's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing that all you have to do is believe. You need to make sure that you are that you're doing more than believing. That's the whole point of James chapter 2. But as it goes on, now I got a phone call. Yeah, I hung up on the last one, but we'll just continue on. Hopefully it won't. Let's see here. Verse 3, it says, "How hast thou counseled him that hath no wisdom? And how hast thou plentifully declared the thing as it is?" And so, Job thinks that their wisdom is, of course, it's no wisdom. Sometimes people think that they're pretty smart and they're really wise, and that's not a good sign for wisdom. If someone goes, well, I'm a pretty wise guy, they may be a wise guy, but it's not the kind of wise that they think. It always makes me cringe a little bit, and I know I've mentioned this to the brethren in Cerrito, but I'll mention it again. I remember this one guy that was really pressing me and saying, "Hey, you know what? If you don't," I was calling another preacher asking for advice on something, and this person was an elder, and they said, "No, you don't ask that preacher for advice. You ask us. If you want wisdom, then you come and you get wisdom from us." And this had happened so many times, and I said, to be honest, I'll go ask for wisdom where I find wisdom. I'm not going to just, if you think that you've got wisdom, and of course I didn't say this part, but if you think that you've got wisdom and you're telling everybody, I'm wise, then you're probably not wise. I believe there's a proverb that states that. But, we know when we see it. We know when we see wisdom. And these guys are not being wise at all. So, how hast thou counseled him that hath no wisdom? Job thinks that they don't have any wisdom. and he had said earlier that it was equal to ashes, and his friends have not been there to help. They've been there and they've been hurting him. He's not been helped at all during this time. Verse 4. To whom hast thou uttered words, and whose spirit came from thee? So where did you get those really meaningful words from? Again, this is sarcasm. Now, granted, this is a conversation, and sometimes, that people talk differently than they would from a, like maybe from like a teaching standard, or from the pulpit or something like that. But, Job is being very, very honest with them and saying, where did you get those really meaningful words? Of course, they weren't meaningful, and they were designed to even hurt Job. Verse 5, dead things are formed from under the waters, and the inhabitants thereof. So, Job's description of the power from God, they're calming to Job. It says, dead things are formed from under the waters, and the inhabitants thereof. Verse 6 says, hell is naked before him, and destruction hath no covering. God can do things, and He does things in even a secretive way, and yet when it comes to the things of hell, the things of the unseen world, the things of the grave, God sees those things openly. Verse 7, He stretcheth out the north over the empty place, and hangeth the earth upon it. These are kind of scientific statements here, and there are lots of scientific little things that are mentioned in Job, and that was one of those things I really liked when I was growing up, and I read some of Job because there were so many things that we could go and we could back it up with what we know from science, and we'll get to more of those. But when you think about this, in the north there are no stars. It says, so He stretcheth out the north over the empty place, and He hangeth the earth upon it. You could get into some very deep topics. I'll go ahead and mention this because there's some really good material on these things. We would be getting into a different kind of a lesson, like a science textbook kind of a lesson here. But I would urge you to go to Apologetics Press. I believe it's apologeticspress.org. You can Google it nonetheless, but it may be .com, but I believe it's .org. But you can go there and you can find several articles, and you're going to find lots of stuff on Job. Matter of fact, you could probably type in, they have a little search bar on the side of their website, and you can type in these little passages, and they're going to come up with articles in which they're mentioned, and you'll find lots of things that I'll be honest are beyond me as far as I haven't taken the time to study a lot of these things. Science is just not my cup of tea. I'm a history guy, so I'm not much into science. I know only the basics here, but there are some really neat things. I've actually got some things in your notes that I'll be giving you when we all get back together, that we'll talk more in depth about some of these things, about Earth's density and things like that. Job 26 and verse 8, He bindeth up the waters in His thick clouds, and the cloud is not rent under them. And so this is one of those things, and this is an interesting fact, and Job is talking about this without any real scientific knowledge, but he understands this thing. The cloud is not rent. The idea here is that the water, it evaporates and it goes up and it makes these clouds in the sky, these thick clouds. They're made of water, and it says, and the cloud is not rent under them. It's not torn up. It's not destroyed. And it's the idea is that this is one of those amazing things that God can do, that God has made this earth in such a way. And it's, as a kid, you always thought, oh, I could go sit on that cloud. I would love to just go sit on that cloud, especially after you've seen Mary Poppins. You think, oh, you can just go sit on one of those things. No, that's water. And Job even knew that. Job knew that those clouds were made of water, and that at the right time, that's when they would open up and pour out rain. Verse 9, He holdeth back the face of his throne, and spreadeth his cloud upon it. He hath compassed the waters with bounds until the day and night come to an end. And so, he has confined the light and the dark. God has told Job, about this. Job has some understanding here that he would have had to have gotten from God. Half of the world is light and half of the world is dark, and as the rotation goes, and so that's the until the day and night come to an end. We're half and half here. There's so much to talk about, but Job is really being amazed at the power of God, and he absolutely believes in the power of God, and he respects God, he reveres God. And that's one thing that his friends don't understand about him, that he understands God's powers and realizes that God is in control. Verse 11, the pillars of heaven tremble and are astonished at his reproof. So, of course, again, a reference to the power of God. He divideth the sea with his power, and by his understanding he smiteth through the proud. How does one divide the sea with his power? Well, by the wind. He's able to do to make waves of the sea and whatnot. Verse 13, by his spirit he hath garnished the heavens, his hand hath formed the crooked serpent. And so he has garnished the heavens, he has made it beautiful. All the persons of the Godhead were there in creation. We know that from John chapter 1. And so by this he hath garnished the heavens, and his hand hath formed the crooked serpent. That is the constellations. There are so many different constellations in the sky, and this is a reference to one. God, of course, made all of these things. He made the things of this world and the things that are outside of this world. He created it all. Verse 14, lo, these are parts of his ways, but how little a portion is heard of him. But the thunder of his power, who can understand? Now, this is the last verse that we'll go ahead and we'll stop here in chapter 26. We'll pick up with chapter 27 later. I thought we could go through it a little quicker. But the power of God is subject to his will. The idea is, we haven't even scratched the surface of our understanding of the things of God and how He's made everything. If you think about it, the things that we have that we can understand about God really pale in comparison to the things that are there. That's one of the things I've mentioned about studying the Bible. One of the things about Bible study is that sometimes people think well, I have attained. If you think that you've attained, you haven't, because I as well as I talked to Brother Garland Elkins one time, and I would say that he probably had the New Testament memorized and a great majority of the Old Testament memorized. He told me, no, I don't, but I certainly didn't believe him because of him always, when we'd have a conversation, I would bring out a verse and he would be able to tell me the context of the things around it and not even open up his Bible. So I truly did not believe him on that. But one thing that I talked about with him one time was that the more I learned, the more I realized I didn't know. And when you think that you really know it all, especially when it comes to the Bible, when you think that you've got it all down, you probably don't. the more I've studied, the more I realize, man, I didn't know as much as I thought I did. And there's so much in there. Now, it doesn't mean that it's impossible for us to be righteous, because I know some people would say that. Is it impossible for us to know all that we need to know in order to go to heaven? No, that's not true at all. But there are some certain fine points of understanding that we need to grasp, and that only comes with study, and that comes with much study. And so we need to continue to delve into God's Word. And we're going to have to delve into chapter 27 next time. I hope you've enjoyed this. My understanding is we got probably at least another 2 weeks of this. And so I will have 2 more class sessions of Job at the very least, and we'll just kind of play it by ear. If I have to do more, then we'll have to do more, but we are kind of in subjection to our circumstances at this point. But I hope that you have had a good week, and I hope you continue to have a good week, and hope that you are prepared to be able to worship God on Sunday morning.